Ladies and gentlemen, the Super Bowl is ready to kick off Sunday, February 13th at 6:30 Eastern between the LA Rams and the Cincinnati Bengals. Millions of viewers from around the world will be tuning in with an estimated audience of 150 million people. Now, some stats. It's estimated that 12.5 million pizzas will be sold, $1.3 billion spent on beer, and hey, some positive news, about $13 million spent on vegetable trays. Getting some healthy options in there. It's always good. Now, along with Stafford and Burrow, an unwelcome presence on the football field are concussions. I'm your host, physical therapist Jimmy McKay from the Abilities Research Center. We bring in three Mount Sinai colleagues to share expert insight on concussion. First up is an assistant professor, medical director in the Department of Rehabilitation and Human Performance, and the director of running medicine. If she were on the Mount Sinai Super Bowl team, she'd be our running back. She does it all. She runs, she catches, she blocks. Let's bring her in the studio, Dr. Mariam Zakhary. Mariam, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jimmy. Thank you so much.
Running back. We just hand you the ball and we get out of the way. All right. So
high hopes for me.
Big game on Sunday. The CDC defines a concussion as a traumatic brain injury, or TBI, caused by a bump, blow, or jolt to the head, or by a hit to the body that causes the head and the brain to move rapidly back and forth. So we start with you. On and off the football field, what are some common and maybe some not so common causes of concussion?
So thank you for starting with the definition, because I think we all just think blow to the head. That's what causes a concussion. Somebody gets hit, they fall to the ground, hit their head, or they get hit directly in the head. But other things, so any high velocity movement of the head, right? So whiplash. Another thing that can happen is that can cause concussion, because that is high velocity movement. That's movement of the brain inside of our noggin, inside of our skull, that can cause trauma to the brain, the same sort of kind of inflammation that takes place when you have direct head trauma. Other things in sports that sometimes we don't give as much attention to as head trauma is jaw trauma. So getting any trauma to the facial bones can also cause that violent shaking and that inflammation in the brain as well. And there's a lot of studies out there that talk about football players and the appropriate mouth guard for that reason. And that's why they make such a big deal. And that's why there are studies about mouth guards, is that's another way that someone can obtain a concussion. Other things outside of football, riding your bike, when you talk to a rehab doctor, they'll tell you to wear a helmet whenever you have the opportunity. And one of them is riding our bike. And I think City Bike is one thing that's highlighting that right now. Are you carrying your helmet around when you're unlocking that City Bike and taking it for a spin? Because a lot can happen on New York City streets, and bike riders aren't the safest. So there's so many ways that we can obtain this head trauma, and it's not just blunt blows to the head.
All right, so drawing a straight line from the concussion and all the different causes to the big game coming up on Sunday, there's actually a concussion return to play protocol in place by the NFL. We hear about this a lot. All players need to progress through this 5-step protocol before being cleared to return to games. Now, the steps are symptom-limited activity, aerobic exercise, football-specific exercise, club-based non-contact drills, and then back to full football activity clearance. Dr. Zakhary, everybody wants their favorite player to be back on the field as quickly as possible. But why is it so important to go through these steps and not to return to play too early?
Everyone wants their favorite athlete back on the field as soon as possible. Every athlete wants to be back as soon as possible. So this is a really important topic. You have inflammation healing going on in the brain. The brain is not ready to have another impact, to have another injury, and God forbid there is any sort of trauma, any sort of shearing, any sort of injury to the brain. It could be deadly and cause some permanent effects in the athlete. And also going back too soon, whether it's a football player on the field or just a student at school who's getting a lot of computer time and a lot of stimulation in the brain, you're just prolonging the time to healing. You're not giving your brain the opportunity to rest and to heal so you can safely get back into it. Whether your game is sitting at a desk and getting your schoolwork done and getting back to work, or if you're an athlete on the football field, soccer field, whatever your sport may be.
So very dangerous to come back too soon, as well as coming back too soon is going to do the opposite, which is prolong your return safely.
Right.
Excellent. Dr. Zakhary, thanks for stopping by and sharing some insight ahead of the big game.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Finally, we have an orthopedic sports medicine surgeon, Dr. Robert Parisian. Robert, I don't know. When I think surgeons, I think very, very Precise, very skilled, almost surgical. See what I did there? I think you might be the quarterback of our Mount Sinai Super Bowl team. Welcome to the huddle here, Robert.
Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate it. It's great to be here. I guess it's only fitting that I'd be the quarterback of this huddle. Since back in my playing days, I was a quarterback, and then recruited at multiple places, and I played in college too, and played quarterback and safety. So
here's a term that's been getting more and more attention since it was implemented in 2008 in the NFL, and that's their targeting rule. Let's start broad. What's the targeting rule, and what's really its main focus?
So the targeting rule is really just to protect the defensive player. And so we know that in football, there's high energy impact and contact and a lot of different plays. And so the targeting rule is really to help protect both the defenseless player on offense, and also the tackler on defense. And so that's really the targeting rule aims to protect that player by decreasing the forcible contact to a defensive player really at any region above the shoulders and the head and neck area. And now it's often confused because many times we think of the targeting rule as going and hitting with your head. Well, not necessarily. And so one aspect and major aspect of the targeting rule is if you're just going to the defensive player above the shoulders to the head and neck region with your forearm, your elbow, your fist, at all accounts. And that is included in the targeting rule. Now, the other aspect is, yes, the crown of the helmet. And so when we talk about the crown of the helmet, this is the face mask. This is the head of the helmet. You're taught to hit with your head up, and you're taught to hit with the face mask, put the face mask on the ball. The crown of the helmet is when you dip your helmet down and dip your head down. This is the crown of the helmet. Now, this can lead to head and neck injuries in the tackling athlete. As you can imagine, when your head's up, your neck is a little bit safer. When you put that crown down and you expose the crown, you're exposing yourself to increased injury and that axial force that's going to be driven down your neck and into your spine. This is also when players launch themselves. So when players launch themselves up with the crown of the helmet up into that head and neck region of that offensive player. And so that's also part of the targeting rule. What many people may or may not know, targeting rule was implemented in 2008, but high schools have only really implemented this back in 2014. So there's a little bit of a lag and a little bit of delay at that level.
Well, talking about high school, you have some recent research published on the specific rule in high school. You're part of a national concussion surveillance survey looking at the targeting rule. What did your work find in terms of the effectiveness of the targeting rule in high school football?
We looked at a national injury surveillance database of athletes presenting to emergency departments. Now, I want to be clear. Now, these are athletes who presented to emergency departments with concussions or concussive symptoms. This sample is actually really underrepresents the number of athletes that were sustaining concussions or had concussive symptoms during that time period. Why is that? Because the vast majority of athletes and football players who sustain concussions aren't presenting to the emergency department. They're being treated inappropriately so. Not everybody who has a concussion or concussive symptoms has to go to the emergency department, but many of those athletes are being treated by the trainers, by the sports medicine specialists that are there in the field, and then with appropriate follow-up and going through that post-concussion protocol. We looked at the National Federation of State High School Associations from 2009 to 2019 over a 10-year period. Why did we choose that period? Because again, the implementation of the targeting rule took place in 2014 in high school. And so we found a national estimate of 155,000 concussions in this age group, which was 14 to 18 years of age, high school age athletes. In the years prior to the targeting rule, from 2009 to 2013, we took out that 2014 data, the year that it was implemented. We saw a 17% increase in the concussion rates. From 2015 to 2019, we saw a 6% decrease in the rates of athletes presenting to emergency departments. So that was a flip of 23%, 17% increase prior, 6% decrease after. And we published this in the Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine. And we believe that it's a very important study to show that this rule certainly is having a helpful impact on decreasing the rates of concussions in high school football. Much as it has done at the collegiate and at the NFL level. We also have a study that looks at head and neck injuries and it was designed the same way, the same methodology, across high schools across this country. And we found a significantly decreased incidence of head and neck injuries in addition to concussions with a post implementation of the targeting rule as compared to pre implementation of the targeting rule.
Robert, thanks so much for that. Now you're armed with a little bit more information about what's going on inside the helmet on the field just in time for the coin toss this Sunday. Thanks for watching this Super Bowl edition of Ask Mount Sinai Anything.